Welcome everyone to the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council meeting of July 13. I wanted to start by noting we had a technical glitch in sending out our agenda, so there are a number of people who did not receive our meeting agenda until yesterday. I apologize for that and hope that's not too great of an inconvenience for you. We'll try to make sure that doesn't happen again. We do have a quorum here today. We have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of our 11 members here in attendance in person, and we have 2 of our members, Dave and Dina, participating online. So thank you very much for being here. I'd like to start by going around the room and letting people introduce themselves. Laura, let's start with you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Vernon. I'm the Great Salt Lake Coordinator with Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Randy Elliott, Davis County Commissioner.
Jeff Scott, Box Elder County Commission.
Monjo Masson, Central Davis Sewer, filling in for Leland Myers.
Don Leonard of the Great Salt Lake Brine Shrimp Cooperative.
Joe Havasi, Extractive Industry.
And Jeff Richards, I represent the migratory bird production areas.
Let me have them carry this
Laura.
around. How about the people online could introduce themselves while we pass this around?
Dave, Dina, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. This is Dina Blaze. I represent Salt Lake County.
Hi, Dave Livermore with the Nature Conservancy.
Is Tom Ward online by any chance? I understood he was joining us. Not yet. Go ahead.
Todd Stonley, Division of Water Resources.
Craig Miller, Division of Water Resources.
Linda Freitas, Friends of Great Salt Lake.
Marcelle Shoop, Saline Lakes Program for National Audubon Society.
Lake Bingham Water Rights.
Leah Richardson, Water Rights.
Anne Neville, the Nature Conservancy.
Kayla Worthen, Jacobs Engineering.
And Jeff Denblaker, Jacobs Engineering.
Jan Streifel, League of Women Voters.
Jack Ray, the Utah Waterfowl Association.
Max Malmquist, National Audubon Society.
Jim Van Leeuwen, Utah Division of Wildlife Resources.
Christine Rumsey, U.S. Geological Survey.
Hannah McElwain, U.S. Geological Survey.
Evan Curtis, Governor's Office of Planning and Budget.
Lisa Roberts, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Jamie Barnes, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Todd Adams, Department of Natural Resources.
Ben Steyerman, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Keith Hambrecht, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Marissa Weinberg, also Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Rob Hartman, U.S. Magnesium.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. As I mentioned, the agenda was sent out ultimately to everyone on our list. Was the hydromapper added to the list before it was sent out or after? Okay, so there is one difference in the agenda that was sent out, and that is down under member discussion. We're going to have a brief, we've added GSL hydromapper. We want a little feedback on that, and so we've added that to the agenda at that point. So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as revised. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. Any debate or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Thank you. That's unanimous. So we have a fairly busy agenda today, so I'll launch right into it. As you know, the Utah legislature, with the support of the governor, appropriated $40 million to fund the Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Program. The Department of Natural Resources, I think, is to be commended for acting quickly to implement the process to establish the program. It's completed the RFP process and selected a coalition of the Nature Conservancy and Audubon to create and operate the trust fund. We've asked them to provide an update today. We were hoping for a fairly detailed update, but it's taking a little bit of time to get the paperwork done between the state and the selected entities. And so we'll just have a brief update today and invite them back for a more thorough discussion at our September meeting. So Marcelle, if you want to take a couple of minutes. How about at the pulpit?
Dave, did you want to say anything before I jump in?
You're muted, Dave.
To thank you, Don, and appreciate the opportunity to present briefly, and Marcelle will do that for us, and no one better to do it than Marcelle, so take it away.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Yes, just to, I'm going to keep this short, I hope. But I think just to remind everybody that the HB 410, the program that set up the Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Program, did provide $40 million to set up a water trust. And the mechanism for doing that was for Forestry, Fire, and State Lands and other agencies and Great Salt Lake Advisory Council to choose an eligible applicant or applicants to receive a grant to get the water trust set up. And so Audubon and TNC filed an application requesting the opportunity to do so. And that was announced that we had received the award in June. So we've been acting fast and furious for actually even before the award, because we had to work on putting together a pretty robust application. But to pull together the agreements and the structure for the trust so we can try to move quickly. And I anticipate that everybody can appreciate that water trusts elsewhere in the world usually take years to get established and up and running, and we're trying to do this pretty quickly. And so we appreciate the time to come back in maybe it's September meeting to provide more details. I just would remind everybody that the statute provides for an advisory council to be set up, and we look forward to moving forward with that process as quickly as possible. We anticipate using a facilitator to help us get that up and running. And the legislation also provides for the types of representatives to sit on that advisory council, and you can refer to the legislation, but it's not that dissimilar from some of the advisory council members for Great Salt Lake. And then we also are in the process of making sure that we have adequate staffing and consulting to actually get this off the ground and running. The trust, by the legislation, the monies can be used for several different types of projects or programs. And I would say those categories are pretty broad, and I'm not going to go through them in detail today. We'll have that chance later. But just to say that if you were to kind of bucket them, they fall in the concept of water, retaining or enhancing water flows for Great Salt Lake to improve water quantity and quality. And then also 25% of the trust funds are to be spent on wetlands restoration and protection in order to benefit the hydrology of the lake. There's other opportunities for working on improving distribution of water and working with doing assessments as necessary, but we definitely view the state and other partners out there as really important partners and friends in helping us accomplish and have success with this water trust. We also recognize that $40 million is a lot of money, but in the scheme of water in the state of Utah, it's not a lot of money. And so we want to be sure that there is a good prioritization process and that the funds are spent effectively. And then there's also a requirement to have significant in-kind match or contribution. And we look forward to working with a number of partners and others who are interested in the success of the trust in Great Salt Lake to helping make that possible. And I just want to be sure to thank all of those who submitted letters of support for the trust in general, or the concept in general, and willingness to work in partnership, as well as those who supported the application from Audubon and TNC. We're excited that there's so much interest, that people really do want to help. And at the same time, we know that the trust doesn't stand on its own, that we need to continue moving forward with many other programs and efforts, that some of which the legislature pushed through this year, but we know that a lot of those are focused on water management and the way we use water in the state. And so again, I think, you know, I hate to use I don't know what you call it, a phrase that's sort of a little bit trite, but it really is going to take a community, and it's going to take a big community. And so we're looking forward to trying to work with stakeholders in the watershed to make this happen. And in the meantime, since we're going to keep the agenda going, you know, I could probably entertain questions, but if you'd rather, Don, I'm happy, and I think Dave is too, for anybody with questions, suggestions, ideas, water that they know of, to give us a call anytime. Reach out, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Marcelle. Before you step down, anyone have a process question for Marcelle, not where we're at? Again, I commend the Department of Natural Resources and Forestry, Fire, State Lands, and TNC and Audubon for moving so quickly. Any process questions?
So process questions. So if you have neighbors or people that you know of that have water rights that they can sell that goes into the Great Salt Lake, what is the process of that?
So if we're already receiving a lot of inquiries, and so we're just trying to follow up on those. Obviously, we're not taking immediate action on anything at the moment, but trying to make sure that we're tracking those and they're in the pipeline and thinking about how they fit into the big picture. So if you do know of somebody, feel free. I should have given my email address, but I'll make sure you have it. So. Thank
you, Randy. I have a softball question. Marcelle, do you have any idea when the first 500,000 acre feet of wet, new, fresh water will hit the lake as a result of this program?
Oh, Don,
Okay,
bless your heart.
we'll wait till September for that answer.
What was that?
We'll wait until our September meeting
Okay,
for that
all right.
answer.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Give you lots of time to figure that one out.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you very
anyway,
much.
And again, thanks to everyone. Really, very appreciated.
Thank you, Marcelle.
Do you want me to turn this off, Laura?
Next agenda item has to do with Phragmites. Fighting Phragmites. That actually sounds like a football team, doesn't it? The Fighting Phragmites. Anyway, that's been a priority for the Advisory Council for a number of years. We previously supported research and also were quite active in going to the legislature and securing funding to fight Phragmites. We've had several of our Advisory Council members who have asked for an update on the status of that fight. And so we've invited Keith Hambrecht of the Forestry, Fire, and State Lands to provide that update. Keith, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Don. Where is it? Okay, you're sharing whole screen. Okay. And can we go here and then go here? No. No, I don't. Working? All right. Okay. So my name is Keith Hambrecht. I'm the Invasive Species Coordinator for Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. How about now?
Better.
Good. Okay. My name is Keith Hambrecht. I'm the Invasive Species Coordinator for Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. I started this job in 2016, which is when Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands received funding through initiatives of the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council to control invasive Phragmites on Great Salt Lake. And those efforts have included, as Don mentioned, both research and on-the-ground efforts to remove Phragmites. We've made a lot of progress. I have a lot to share. Hopefully I can get through it in a short amount of time. we have. So I just want to give a brief rundown on the established best practices we now have, give you guys an overview of what's being done and where and who's doing it, and then some of the results that we're seeing, and then what these efforts look like into the future. So I'm really grateful that we have an amazing community for this effort. So Karn Kettenring's Wetland Ecology Lab at Utah State University has been doing a lot of the research, and then a lot of folks with Division of Wildlife Resources that are managing the waterfowl management areas, the impounded wetlands that are state managed on the lake, have also been heavily involved in the effort. And Chad Cranny is over that program for DWR. And really the three of us have worked along with other students to try to consolidate all of the research that was done into best practices. And we now have guides that kind of cover the whole spectrum of this work. So our first guide was how to restore Phragmites invaded wetlands. It went through how we effectively remove Phragmites. Then we put together best practices on cattle grazing for Phragmites control, another tool in the toolbox that we're using. And then our most recent publication was on how we can effectively reseed post-Phragmites control. And that best management practices for that are really ongoing. So we have all of this research and on-the-ground experience now for years and years of doing this work. I've now been at it for 6. And we're really at a point where we're kind of dialing in our protocols. And so this slide shows just our simple protocol. If we don't have water control in an area, or good control over a water, and we're a little bit more limited on the tools that we have a simple protocol that we can apply. This is what's been being used down on Utah Lake with great success. But basically, the long and short of Phragmites control is we know that we need to use herbicide to kill the plant. It's a perennial plant and it will grow back every year. We know the timing of herbicide spraying is very important. Just for context, burning alone won't kill Phragmites. We know that. There was a really large fire, 1,500 acre fire last summer, the Legacy Fire right out here in Farmington Bay. It was hot and intense, had 100-foot flames, and 1 month later, the Phragmites was multiple feet tall. So we know we have to spray it. We know we have to time our spraying well. And then we come back in with mechanical removal of mowing or trampling. And then we repeat this procedure to reduce the Phragmites cover to less than 10%. And then we go into a monitoring phase. And so then with all the research and experience we have, we're able to do a much more complicated protocol if we have more tools in the toolbox available. The most important tool is hydrologic control, and luckily we have that in most places with these WMAs and also now the migratory bird refuge, where we can actually intentionally flood areas or drought stress areas. And so this allows us to tailor our control efforts, incorporate grazing, incorporate revegetation, and we're able to do an even better job of removing Phragmites. And so what that looks like on the ground, so here's an example in Farmington Bay. So these are the sovereign lands outside of Farmington Bay WMA, and we've divided the area up into different, we call them hydrologic control blocks. And these blocks are areas that we're relatively confident we can intentionally fully flood or fully drought stress. And that helps us incorporate that into our more complicated protocols. So right now we're facing these serious drought conditions on the lake. And so we really have to budget our water. We know we need really healthy Phragmites that's well watered to get an effective herbicide spray. So we can budget our water to intentionally flood one of these zones and do multiple years of treatments. And then once we get it to a state where we're happy with, we can shift to a more natural hydrologic regime and then do more deep flooding in other areas to remove more Phragmites. And so with all these protocols and best management practices and this huge collaborative effort, what that looks like now on the lake is we're now working on a lake-wide scale. The whole lake and most everyone that can be involved is involved now. This isn't a great map, but just starting at the north end of the lake, my cursor up there? Yeah. So up here is Public and Salt Creek WMAs. The WMAs are controlling Phragmites in all, the DWR WMA managers are controlling Phragmites following these protocols in all their WMAs, including those two. Then we have the Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge. They're under new management now, and we've started collaboration with them. And so we're working to treat some of the Phragmites out here in Bear River Bay. They're working within their boundaries. This is the Willard Spur WMA. I started working there for Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, and now that it's a WMA, its management has been passed off to DWR. Harold Crane WMA, Phragmites being treated in there. Ogden Bay, Howard Slough WMA. There are plans for the North Davis Sewer District outfall. Chris Brown with the Nature Conservancy is controlling Phragmites in the Shorelands Preserve here. And then the Farmington Bay WMA, which is kind of the map that I showed. And then I'm treating as many acres as possible based on the hydrology that we have with this drought on all the lake bed adjacent to all these areas. And we're also now have some efforts down here on the South Shore. So if some of you might remember, we had an estimate in 2012 that there was approximately 20 to 30,000 acres of Phragmites on Great Salt Lake. Well, all of these efforts add up now to about 30,000 acres. So we're really on a lake-wide scale now. And what we saw, what we've seen on Utah Lake has had an entire lake-wide effort for about 10 years now. Phragmites cover there has been reduced by 70%. If I extrapolate that to Great Salt Lake, now that we're on a lake-wide scale, I would estimate in somewhere around 10 to 15 years, we could be looking at just a maintenance mode of spot treating Phragmites each year, rather than removing large established stands. So what our results look like as far as what we're seeing out on Great Salt Lake, we see rapid success where we're able to apply this protocol and things go according to plan as far as our equipment being in place and the water being in place. We know we can be successful pretty rapidly. Where we're experiencing challenges, right now our biggest challenge is not enough water. So if Phragmites is drought stressed, it's very hard to kill because the herbicide is not effective. So that just means we have to bide our time and opportunistically treat when we can, when water is available. And so here's what some of those results look like. This is monitoring done by Department of Agriculture for our big project outside of the Turpin unit here at Farmington Bay WMA. And if you look at the gray line, we went from 90% Phragmites cover in 2017, down to less than 10% in 2018. We know we have to treat for multiple years in a row, so we see that rebound in 2019 and then back down in 2020. And here's what that looks like on the ground. So in 2017, on the left here is over 1,000 acres of Phragmites as far as the eye can see. And then 5 years later in 2021, the whole area is opened up. We have open water and we have quite a diversity of forbs and grasses out there, much more desirable species. Then another example outside of Howard Slough, on the left, all the light brown vegetation is standing dead Phragmites. And then after 4 years of treating it, we have Salicornia and alkali grass has taken the place of the Phragmites. And so we're seeing success. We're working on a lake-wide scale. We know that we're limited in some areas based on conditions, which might delay our timing. But in light of all that, where do we go? Well, we know we just have to keep continuing following these protocols and following our best management practices that have been established. Keep working into new areas and treating additional acres. We need to continue monitoring, which I can touch on some monitoring efforts briefly, and then continue to work on establishing our best management practices for revegetation, which is an important piece that we're working on now that we're removing so much Phragmites. And then we want to investigate some long-term restoration approaches, aiming at controlling hydrology to a finer detail where we can. And then we're really working on developing a remote sensing program so that we can map Phragmites every year aerially. Our revegetation efforts, right now we're really trying to develop optimal sowing density and different seed compositions, as well as other techniques that we can use to increase germination. And right now we're using just a farm disc plow to create microtopography, which we're finding is increasing our germination rates. So our current best practice is just broadcast seeding onto areas that we've dissed. And we just did this 2 weeks ago here in Farmington Bay, and we put out 3,000 pounds of native seed onto dissed areas. And here's some of what that looks like. So we're getting some pretty good germination of native species right where the disc plow is run through the area. On the right here is a flat area that hasn't been dissed and we have no germination. And then on the left, you can see alkali bulrush germinating. Some of our restoration approaches that we're investigating are actually augmenting salt. So in the lake level matrix, people probably remember that at low lake levels, we have Phragmites dominance. So when the lake is low, there's more ground for Phragmites to cover. And that's what's happened after the floods of the 80s receded. Phragmites was creeping further and further and further out onto the lake. Well, another factor with low lake levels is we only have fresh water flowing from east out to the lake, and we don't have any salts flushing into these areas. So these brackish wetlands are becoming more and more fresh, and we're wondering if we can actually bring salt in on the upstream end, which would help create the habitat that we're looking for and facilitate some of these native species that we'd like to see. Additionally, we can continue to keep dialing in our hydrologic controls. We learned from Becca Downer's research on Great Salt Lake that hydro periods, the timing of water, the depth of water, and the duration of water, those are really the key components that dictate what habitat we have. So where on the lake do we have the ability to control the water to aim for specific habitat types? It's kind of what we're working towards. And then finally, I mentioned monitoring and remote sensing effort. We have several trials now that are successful with mapping Phragmites with drones. Here's one example outside of Howard Slough WMA. And we're still kind of dialing in our algorithms for mapping Phragmites remotely and how we're going to collect this imagery on a high enough resolution and high enough temporal scale to get Phragmites mapped every year and then utilize this for managing our frag. Yes.
Dina has a question.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to wait till the end or if you want to take it.
Well, that is the end. So that's
okay.
what I got. So yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks. And this may be information that you've already shared with us, and I apologize if it is, and I haven't retained that information. But the funding source for these programs, I'm just curious as to where it's coming from, if there is enough to continue on in what sounds like a very long process that you've laid out for us, especially with the sort of post work monitoring that's anticipated. Can you just speak to that very briefly?
Maybe someone can help translate that question for me. I think I heard something about where it's coming from, but
yeah, the funding for the program.
Where our funding is coming from?
Yeah.
So we have funding through the state legislature. It's sovereign lands restricted account money. that is reinvested into sovereign lands through Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. And in the past few years, we've taken that funding and leveraged it with the Division of Wildlife Resources, using it as match for Pittman-Robertson funding. And we've this fiscal year 23, we actually doubled our budget using Pittman-Robertson funding. And so for this year, we have more funding than we might be able to spend just because of the drought. We had planned lake-wide efforts, and there's so little water that we're actually might be limited just by water rather than funding. I don't know if that fully answered your question. I couldn't quite catch the whole thing.
No, that fully answers my question. Thank you very much.
Keith, have you seen where, you get vast expanses of what is now dry lake bed? Have you seen Phragmites not only be drought stressed, but is it actually limiting or killing Phragmites in those areas?
In the severely drought stressed areas, you will see frag that looks dead. But my guess is the moment it has water again, it will spring back to life. Yeah. I've seen Phragmites growing out of the crack in a sidewalk in downtown Salt Lake.
Other questions? Yes.
Dave, do you have a question?
Yeah, great presentation, incidentally. It's so terrific that this is the lake-wide approach. So my question is about machinery. A few years ago, the TNC invested in a Marshmaster, which is a remarkable kind of amphibious vehicle with tracks that mows and sprays. And I've heard there's other Marshmasters now on the lake. Are you utilizing that equipment, and do you think it's helpful?
Yes. So each of the WMAs has a Marshmaster. And so within all the DWR WMAs, the Marshmasters are being used for mowing, trampling, and spraying Phragmites. We also utilized the DWR Marshmasters for the seeding that we did in Farmington Bay. And then much of the work on the lake bed on sovereign lands is contracted out to companies that also have Marshmasters. So there's really, like, on any given day, there's probably at least 3 Marshmasters driving around in Great Salt Lake wetlands doing something.
Terrific.
And it really is the best piece of equipment that we've found. I'm sure some people will discover some new and better things at some point.
Thank you. Other questions? Go ahead.
It looks like we started a trend.
Are you working with other divisions in the DNR for your remote sensing by drone and interpretation of that?
Yes. Some of our initial efforts, so as far as within DNR, we have someone at Utah Geological Survey that was flying the drone for us and kind of dialing in the hardware piece of flying and capturing the imagery. And then we partnered with the Digit Lab and Remote Sensing Lab at University of Utah to trial a lot of the algorithms for processing the imagery into a classified map. And now we're looking at trying to do that in-house with our GIS department just to increase our turnaround time. Because our ultimate goal is, can we capture this imagery in July and have maps by the end of July that could actually be used for our treatments that are happening at the end of the summer.
Thank you, Joe. Other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Keith, what is your budget amount?
We have $500,000 a year on the restricted account funding through Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Did I see another hand back here? In the spirit of the softball question I threw at Marcelle, I'll throw one at you. Do you have a timeline for when Phragmites will be eradicated around the Great Salt Lake?
I do. It will not be eradicated.
Will not.
So
you're dodging my question, Keith.
Yeah. I feel confident that we can get it to what I would consider a maintenance mode, which is just spot spraying every year to keep it from reinvading, and something like maybe 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
Well, keep up the work.
Yeah.
Good work. Thank you very much. We appreciate that presentation and responding to the questions. Next item on our agenda is the Great Salt Lake Watershed Assessment. The legislature appropriated $5 million for an integrated water assessment to help us better understand where we stand in terms of water needs and supplies. The Utah Division of Water Resources was given that assignment, and we've asked Todd Stoneley to talk to us a little bit about how they intend to complete this project. Thank you for being with us, Todd.
You're welcome. Glad to be here and glad for the invitation. Wasn't that long ago we were here, at least with our consultant Dan Adams, to talk about watershed councils. So
right,
lots of work that we're doing that involves watershed improvement and work. So
we thank you.
Okay, there we go. My name is Todd Stoneley. I'm the Assistant Director at the Division of Water Resources over our planning branch, and happy to talk about the Great Salt Lake Watershed Integrated Water Assessment today. This is a result of House Bill 429, Great Salt Lake Amendments, that was sponsored by Representative Kelly Miles. And the floor sponsor in the Senate was Senator Scott Sandel. And this is unusual that you don't usually see bills with so many co-sponsors, but there were 19 co-sponsors for this bill. So a lot of support for this effort. In a nutshell, the bill provides us, the Division of Water Resources, $5 million to develop a Great Salt Lake Watershed Integrated Water Assessment. I'll try to describe what's contained in that, or what that means here in our key objectives that we've put together. So the bill itself identified about 7 items that we should look at, or at least consider looking at, and we have included those as kind of key objectives for this effort. The first one that was kind of set apart, separate, was an assessment of the impact of low impact development, best management practices associated with post-construction retention, stormwater permit requirements, the impact of those requirements on the water budget of the Great Salt Lake. So that's included in the objectives of this report, or this assessment. Another objective is to develop an integrated surface and groundwater assessment for the Great Salt Lake Watershed. So that's where you get into the integrated part. You're not just looking at surface water, but you're also trying to account for the groundwater and look at those in a holistic way. Objective 3, develop a water budget for the Great Salt Lake and its associated wetlands, including water flows needed to maintain different lake levels. This budget shall take into consideration water quality, ecological needs, economic benefits, and the public health benefits provided by Great Salt Lake. And if you look at that one, there's a lot to unpack in that one. That's a big one. So we'll do our best to capture the main points of that and assess that the best we can. Objective 4, quantify the amount of water and water quality needed to sustain high priority ecological sites upstream of the Great Salt Lake. And I think that last part was just a typo. Apologize for that. Another objective, forecast the quantity of water available under various climate scenarios for all human-related activities, as well as environmental and ecological needs. Objective 6, assess the potential benefits of forest management and watershed restoration to improve water availability, mitigate wildfire risk, and improve water quality. Objective 7, identify and evaluate best management practices that may be used to provide a reliable water supply that meets water quality, agricultural, anticipated growth, and ecological needs. And then any other needs identified through our stakeholder consultation, which is going to be an integral part of developing a work plan for this project. So kind of wanted to outline our strategic approach to this. Early on, we organized a steering committee, and I have a slide in a minute that will show the members of that committee who are just be referred to and asked, run things by that we're trying to do to kind of give us some direction and steer us in the right path as much as we can anticipate. We have been working with Division of Water Quality already to prepare a statement of work for development of the stormwater study that was mentioned at objective number 1. That one was given the same time frame as the work plan. It needs to be done by next November 2023. So we decided that that needed to be done separately on the same path as the rest of the work. And I was going to reach out to James Harris. He's online to see the status of that, but that's been out for bid. I think they've probably got that closed now and are evaluating the contractors that submitted bids for that project. I don't know if you want to mention anything there, Jim, while I'm on that point.
Only to say that it's going to be out to bid until almost the end of July. So a couple more weeks. Were you able to hear that?
Good. Okay, a couple more months. Anyway, so that's on a track where we'll move that parallel to this next bullet item. We have prepared a statement, our scope of work for development of the overall work plan. And we have submitted that to purchasing to solicit statements of qualification for professional services. And that will be to help us develop the work plan. And early on in this process, when we discussed this with the steering committee, we thought it was it would be a good idea to separate the work plan from the overall assessment so that the work plan could identify what needs to go into the assessment, and that those would be kind of separate components. So that's what we've decided to do, move forward on that. And that bid will be open, or those solicitation for SOQs will be open until August 4th. And we hope we get some good technical experts and as well as facilitators that can help us with that work plan. I should note that the work plan will identify key things that we need to do. It will help us prioritize them. And it might even go so far as identifying competent or qualified entities that can do some of that work for us. And that may include staff here at the division that is doing water budget stuff already that could probably satisfy some of the work items. Okay, and then once we get that bid out there, we'll start working with stakeholders to develop the work plan and identify additional study items or potential things we can look at that isn't in that list, or even maybe hone in on what exactly some of those objectives should try to produce for us. And then once that's done in November 2023, we will implement the work plan to develop the Great Salt Lake Watershed Integrated Water Assessment, and that needs to be done by November of 2026. All right, so on our steering committee, we have the director of the Division of Water Resources, Candace Hassenjaeger. We have one of the deputy directors at the Division of Water Rights, Blake Bingham. We have Hugh Hurlow, who's studying groundwater along the shoreline of the Great Salt Lake from UGS, Utah Geological Survey. Got Jim Bocut from the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. Jim Harris with the Division of Water Quality. John Luft from the Division of Wildlife Resources. Paul Thompson from the Water Restoration Initiative. Laura Vernon from Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. And then we're kind of tag teaming it right now with David O'Leary and Ryan Rowland from the United States Geological Survey. And we also have Marcelle Shoop representing the Audubon on that steering committee. I threw this timeline together. It doesn't provide a whole lot of details, but basically in March of 2022, HB 429 was passed by the legislature, and it was signed by the governor soon thereafter. And we've been working since then to organize a steering committee, prepare scopes of work, etc. And we've just sent one of them out. And of course, the water quality is a little bit ahead of the larger one for the work plan on their piece of the stormwater study. So from June to August, we'll be awaiting the results of those solicitations, and then we'll get to work come August, and we'll work hard through November 2023 to develop that work plan. And after that, as I mentioned, the full integrated assessment, we'll be working on that until 2026. The bill actually gives us an extra year to produce a final report, so we don't have to have a published report until 2027, but in essence, the work needs to be done by November 2026, so I didn't extend that out to 27 on this timeline. I'm happy to entertain any questions at this point. I've got my contact information here. I'm happy to hear from you if you've got questions about this. Aaron Austin, our technical services manager, is also assisting me with this implementation of this project, so you're welcome to reach out to him as well.
Any questions? Thank you, Todd.
Maybe just one.
Go ahead.
I'm Tom Tripp from Twilla County's representation today. You know, the schedule out here, you know, we've had a trend here for, what, 10 years of downward lake elevations and problems. This seems like, I won't say leisurely, but it's, you know, it's going to, not that you can do anything in a hurry to change anything anyway, but I think a lot's going to change between now and 2027, or at least it potentially could.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. This bill outlines a certain timeline for us to get more of the data that will be helping resource managers make decisions. In the meantime, we have a declining lake that we have to address that as well. And the Department of Natural Resources has a team that's working on ideas, and we have the trust fund that will be helping out as well. So there's lots of parallel efforts, lots of work going on the lake in addition to this assessment. Say this is a component of the larger picture. Hopefully we'll get some good answers and help with management strategies moving forward.
Other comments, questions, follow-up? Go ahead, Dave.
Thanks for the presentation. Quick question. A few years ago, GSLAC was involved in promoting funding for an integrated water resource model. I remember legislature appropriated $400,000 and a few additional dollars. Has that been useful to your analysis? Or is this just kind of what that was doing on steroids, going far beyond that initial model?
Yeah, I think you're talking about the GoldSim model, GSLIM. That is definitely a tool that we will use and will continue to refine and improve as part of this assessment. We might create other additional models. For example, the climate change modeling that we are doing will be incorporated into it somehow. And that may end up being a riverware model as opposed to maybe GSLIM proper, but we'll have to see how that pans out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Follow-up or other questions? Please.
Thank you. When is the next comprehensive management plan for the lake due to begin that process?
Forestry, Fire, and State Lands is getting ready to tackle that, and we'll likely have an RFP out in the fall.
Cool. So
another concurrent activity going on at the same time.
And from the development of that process, likely we'll be looking at the situation that has changed since the last one in 2013 as far as a water level elevation conversation. And I was just wondering, in light of the information that will come from that process, and referencing the Great Salt Lake elevation matrix as a visual insight, even though there are data gaps, if perhaps through time we can begin talking about a range of an elevation with this kind of principle in mind that we can use as a target, as a goal for the water budget. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. I agree that matrix will be updated with some of the lower elevation information that we're experiencing now, information filled out there that I guess they didn't anticipate it would get that low back when they did that, but that will help us in our assessment as well to identify what optimal levels are, maybe you have to sustain this if you can, a level that you don't want it to go below again, those kind of things. So.
Other questions? Yes. Why don't you come to the mic?
I'm just curious about the Bureau of Reclamation basin study and how that might be integrated into this, if it'll be done at the front end or kind of just along the way, or kind of what you're thinking about that.
Good question. I had intended to mention that the Division of Water Resources, along with many stakeholders, large conservancy districts, others, have been invited to submit an application by the Bureau. They accepted our letters of intent or our desire to do an application. So we are working on preparing an application for a basin study of the Great Salt Lake Basin. And that would be a parallel effort, and it's good that we would be integrally involved in that process, as well as this integrated water assessment, so that we can coordinate as much of the effort as possible. And the nice thing about it is the Bureau is looking at this as anything that you're able to spend on this integrated watershed assessment or integrated water assessment likely would qualify for cost matching on the basin study. So you could potentially be looking at an overall $10 million study from the Bureau's perspective, including these other costs. So it's kind of exciting that these kind of things dovetailed together right at the right time.
Thank you, Todd. Appreciate your presentation today. Now let's move to our next agenda item, which is the Great Salt Lake Tech Team Grant Update. As you know, the Great Salt Lake Technical Team has $200,000 that annually it awards to sponsor research projects related to the Great Salt Lake. It's allocated through a grant process that they've established, and I've asked Laura to report on that process for this year as it was recently completed and the project selected for funding.
Thank you, Don. Yeah, back in May, the Great Salt Lake Tech Team Grant Review Subcommittee met, and we ranked 12 total proposals and were able to award 5 of them. The first proposal that was awarded is measuring resiliency of Great Salt Lake microbialite cyanobacteria, and that's through Westminster College. This and for an amount of $15,400. The second one is improved discharge and water velocity monitoring of bidirectional flows at the Great Salt Lake Breach. That's a USGS project, and the grant request amount was $44,000. The third project we awarded was a dust-related project. It's assessing the vulnerability of northern Utah communities to dust from the contaminated and growing Great Salt Lake playa. That is a grant amount of $51,000. The fourth project is the multi-fidelity modeling of flow and salt transport through the Causeway Breach for $62,000. That's a continuation of the work that USU is doing on the Causeway Breach. Oh, thanks for stopping sharing, Jen. And the last one is the USGS project. It's a wetland water budget and wetland change analysis for the Nature Conservancy's Shoreland Preserve, and that's for $29,000, and that is a second-year request. And we did make some recommendations for projects to fund through the Advisory Council. And so it seems like we can move forward and talk about that. Advisory Council funding, and then I can talk more about the grant projects that we're recommending funding that were submitted as part of this tech team grant application process. Yep.
Any questions about the Great Salt Lake Technical Team projects that received grants? Thank you, Laura. Let's go to the next item, allocation of fiscal year 2023 Great Salt Lake Advisory Council appropriations discussion. Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry, I'm looking into a glare there.
No problem. These are all one-year projects. They anticipate.
Yes, with the exception of the last one.
Continuation.
And that's a continuation, and that's the only, and it will end at the end of this fiscal year, and all the other projects are one-year projects.
Thank you, Jeff. Other questions? All right, great. Let's move to the next agenda item. As you know, we have $125,000 from the brine shrimp royalty to fund Great Salt Lake projects. Earlier this year, you appointed Laura, myself, and Leland as a subcommittee to come up with some recommendations. In the statute creating the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council, one of our 5 specific duties outlined is to, quote, utilize technical support from the Great Salt Lake technical team. We have been asking since the beginning of the year for suggestions for projects that we might fund, and we've received some anecdotal comments, but nothing really substantive. And so the subcommittee decided that we would rely upon the unfunded recommendations of the Great Salt Lake technical team as a pool from which to select. And the next priority unfunded Great Salt Lake technical team project had to do with lake bed mapping, basically mapping the floor of Great Salt Lake using bathymetric LiDAR and looking at the implications for resource management. This wouldn't complete that project, but it would outline and determine the methods to do so accurately. As you know, there was a bathymetric study done a number of years ago. We've since discovered it has some errors and flaws and need a more accurate study of the lake floor. So that project is $75,000. The next one that we would recommend to you today is Great Salt Lake Migratory Shorebird Survey. It was highly recommended but not funded by the advisory or by the technical team. And in looking back at all of the projects that we've funded over the years, almost 30 of them, we found that we had not funded one related to wetland health and shorebird use, and thought it was a compelling set of information, and that we would allocate. The amount of that one is, help me out, Laura, $35,000. So that adds up to $110,000, leaving $15,000 that we could hold back in case a small project comes up in the next few months that we might want to consider. And so our recommendation is that we fund those 2 projects that I've mentioned. Are there any questions about them? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion. Hold up until you get a mic.
Okay, hold on. I participated on the review committee, and I actually did support the LiDAR bathymetric study. It's a proof of concept, but I always did feel like that was a worthwhile project to understand whether in a small area that we had sufficient resolution. The other aspect was the Antelope Island Fault, which I think has a broader implication as we start to understand the potential for seismic activity broadly within the basin range that the Salt Lake Valley is in. So for my part, I think that was a very good choice.
Thank you for your comment. Yes, Jeff.
Where's the money for the shorebird study going? Who's doing the study?
Well, we haven't done an RFP yet, right?
It's the Sageland Collaborative. And so I think they're a nonprofit group, but they would be working with over 150 biologists and birders to coordinate these shorebird surveys.
Great, thanks.
On that same topic, Laura, does this coordinate with the work that Don Paul and Wildlife Resources did, mid-90s to maybe 2000?
They cite that in their proposal and just say that it's, been 25 years since any surveys have been done. So they acknowledge that it has been done and we'll build off it. But so yes, to answer your question.
Good question. Other questions? Speak up. Like I said, got a little glare there. Lynn?
Thank you. I'm wondering if in the future we might look at, again, the Great Salt Lake elevation matrix and the areas where we're lacking data as a potential source of information that we might want to pursue, particularly in the lower elevation areas. So just a thought.
Thank you. Will you note that, Laura?
Yes, I will note that, but this does check one of those boxes because there is one of the gaps is shorebird data, and so this would help fill that.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Lynn. Other questions? Any comments from the council members? Someone willing to make a motion to approve those projects?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the projects as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Tuttle. Todd. Mr. Tripp, nice to see you. Jeff?
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. Any debate or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Thank you. Next on our agenda is member discussion. As you know, we previously funded a GSL hydromapper. It was an idea that came actually, I think, initially from a member of our council, Joe, during a discussion. Appreciate your follow-up on that, Joe, and others who've been involved. I think we're at the point where they would like a little bit of feedback, and Laura in particular, on how to move forward with this. Laura?
One second. Okay. All right, I'm super excited to share or announce that the hydromapper that USGS has created for all of you is complete. Christine is here and she can answer any questions. Thanks for the honor to say ta-da. I think this project was derived from the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council. I just keep going back to the look on Joe's face when there was no water flowing out of the Bear River last year, and just why, how can we find out information about river flows, go to one simple, easy place to get a lot of Great Salt Lake information. We talked about this at the Issues Forum, and I think some of the other Saline Lake folks were super jealous. So I'm excited to be leading this effort, but the hydromapper is here, and I don't want to go into it a lot. I just only wanted to open up a discussion with the council to see how and if you would like to release it, to go public with it. USGS could do a press release, but you guys, I mean, this was your effort, and so we want to hear from you of how you want to do it, or what you think is best and how to get the word out. But just really quick, to highlight some of the things on here, we have salinity and lake levels. So we can go here, you can see what the lake level salinity is, what the lake level is, and what the salinity is. More talk of the matrix. They flipped the matrix on its side, and you can see where we are, current lake level, and how that impacts the different resources. Love it. More water data, current conditions. So again, these are all of the, it's a one-stop shop where you can go get a lot of information on river flows, the Bear, the Weber, and Jordan rivers. And then again, lake level elevations. It's the link to the latest and greatest USGS lake level data that is updated by the minute. And then finally, I just wanted to show the dashboard. This is the USGS centric page, but you can go in and turn layers on and off for lakes, water quality, snow pack, weather conditions, hydrology. So you can spend a lot of time looking around here on all things Great Salt Lake related, and Great Salt Lake Watershed related. So I'm super happy about this tool, and I'm excited to show it to the public. And I'm just curious what the council's thoughts are, and anyone else in the public, if you guys have ideas of how you want to release it, or if you want to share this link out and about, let's do it.
Joe, do you have a comment on that? Since you're the father of our country here.
No, I don't think so. It's a great product. I look forward to using it. I also look forward to really kind of diving into the snowpack tool. Because in my mind, I look at snowpack at Trial Lake or various sort of bellwether locations in my limited view, and begin to assess, in February and March timeframe, like if there's a deficit in one snowpack or one site, how that relates to the general percentage of inflow into the lake. So I look forward to using this tool, and I think it should be publicized, if maybe in collaboration, USGS and GSLAC, because if we can publicize this, then the entire basin is looking at the same tool and not looking at sort of spot elevations on the lake and referencing those sort of in press releases that we've seen here and there over the past couple of years, that there's sort of one-stop data. But congratulations and kudos. That's great.
Thank you, Joe. Other comments?
I should note just one more thing, and this is the first iteration, but USGS is happy and willing, and I think they already have a list of more to-do items to add to this, so we can cumulatively add to it, and maybe that's something that we use the additional funding for, or this one, or in future years, to beef this up and make it even better all the time.
Laura, are we intending to let other sites link to this site?
Sure. But this one is not public at this moment, as I understand it. So I think once you guys give the go-ahead that it's ready, then we'll get instruction on how to release it to the public.
Okay, thank you. Other comments?
Dave, go ahead.
I think Dina was first.
Oh, go ahead, Dina.
I think, Dave, you were first, but we can play Rochambeau, or I'll just go ahead. The one question I had, Laura, is it possible for us to coordinate with USGS when it's ready for public release to do just sort of a media advisory and a media availability? Not, if someone could sort of get some media in the room that I think would be interested in this, have whoever can manage it the best, who is the most adept at sort of using all of the features, to give a little demonstration. I think it's just so critical when a resource like this can be seen by the media as the go-to place for information. And so if we can facilitate that with a media advisory and just a media availability, not a press conference or anything like that, just an opportunity to do a demonstration for the media and other folks that might be interested, I think that might be a good way to do it. I don't know if there's communication support either through our organization or USGS that could help to coordinate that, but that's what I would recommend.
That's great, Dina. USGS, we're going to meet with USGS after this meeting to talk about the strategy. So I think we do have media support that would be willing to do some kind of training, because we would like for people to all be on the same page and getting their information from the same place. So thank you.
And I think any opportunity to sort of share this kind of thing with people like Andy Larson, who's taken on a whole new role, at least with the Salt Lake Tribune, in terms of data analysis, could be really beneficial.
Thank you, Dina. Dave?
I'm just going to second the motion of what Dina said, but I wouldn't hesitate to actually expand on it. I mean, do a press conference. The governor is always looking for things to claim that Utah is doing for the lake. And he might be interested in, I'm not really taking credit, but pointing to this as a great tool. It's just a fantastic accomplishment. And Laura, kudos to you and Joe and others. I'm trying to remember how much, Don, that GSLAC contributed to make this happen. Was it a direct grant?
What was the amount, Laura?
I believe it was $55,000.
Yeah, it's just it's so perfect for a lay audience and for people to understand the lake. It's obviously online and user friendly, so go for it and make sure the GSLAC's logo is part of any announcement.
Thank you, Dave. Other council member suggestions, comments? Got what you need, Laura? Thank you very much. Okay, next on our agenda is future council meetings. Our next meeting is September 14, is that correct? September 14. We will be holding that meeting out at Antelope Island, in the visitor center there. So give yourself a little extra time to get there. Do you recall what we have on our agenda, Laura, or are we soliciting some agenda items here?
I don't recall, but if you have agenda items, we'd be happy to entertain them, if not this time, in the future.
Okay, I did have a request from one of our council members for an update on the status of the Bear River project. What's happening there, where it is, where it seems to be going.
I'll make note of that.
Council interested in that conversation? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other suggestions from council members?
I've just got a couple of
Go ahead, Tom.
extraction things, the lake is in a real interesting place. We've had a discussion about where the matrix is incomplete. I think I can say with a fair amount of authority that nobody likes it where it's at right now. There's no stakeholder that's particularly pleased to have this low of lake elevation. And we normally get 3 million acre feet of water into the lake on a normal year that's holding the lake at an elevation of 4,200. We're about 3 million acre feet of surface inflow. And this year, the Bear River, which contributes nearly 2/3 of that, is at 15% of its normal flow for this kind of date in the middle of the summer. Basically, instead of being, say, 200,000 acre feet, we're about 30,000 acre feet. So we're very low. And just for a little more context, I work at US Magnesium, and they measure analysis for the inflow of the lake every month. The 1st of June, we were at 0.66%, which is really excellent if you're a magnesium guy. 1st of July, it was 0.77. And that makes you start to worry, because at 0.83, the lake saturates. So we're on the south arm, and we're approaching saturation pretty darn fast. And we're anticipating plans on how we're going to desalt our pumps late this year and into maybe next year, because we're going to saturate. At least that's our expectation right now. From this time last year, meaning July of 2021, to when it hit the low spot in November, the lake came down 1.5 feet. And right now, our slope downward is steeper than it was last summer. So I think we can easily expect that we're going to be 2 feet lower. I guess there's pluses and minuses to that. Number one, the solar pond capacity is going to go up because it's proportional to your inlet concentration. Unfortunately, that means you're dropping salt out in the lake, and you'll change the salt operations a little bit different. So someone who's trying to make high purity salt for technical purposes will have a more difficult time doing that. So just some challenges that way. And I think everyone's going to have pumping issues. I know on the south arm of the lake, all of the companies are involved in that right now and going to spend millions of dollars trying to keep their pumping going, but it'll be a challenge. I guess one of the positives is it gets more concentrated. The lake's going to evaporate a little bit slower than it would if it were more fresh. In the brine shrimp industry has raised the flag that higher concentration is not good for them at all. If it saturates, I think it'll be a disaster for them this fall if they have to do that. And that's an if. It may not happen till next year, but we're just not poised on the edge here of important ecological situations that makes me worry a little bit. So I would hope that our model will extrapolate and try to predict what the lake level is going to be at the end of November, and what another year like this would do to us. So I think we're in a period of real challenges where we're kind of in unknown territory. And when we calibrate our model, when you're out at the extremes, your model calibration is always a little shakier. So we've got an interesting time here on the lake. I'm not sure how we're going to manage what we're doing. One of the things I thought was interesting the state legislature appropriated about $7 million to buy water rights to go to the Great Salt Lake. And at the current price of water in Tooele Valley, where I live, that would buy you about 350 acre feet, or about 0.01% of the normal inflow of the lake. So if you're going to try to get back to normal from where we're at right now, you're going to better put $1 billion into it instead of 7 million, because that's the kind of range of problem we're at right now. So we're in uncharted territory. There is some good news. The lake has been this low before. In fact, according to the University of Utah Lake Level Symposium of 1985, the lake went dry or nearly dry in 1365 and stayed dry for 65 years. So that has happened before. The other bad news, in 1701, the lake was into the Utah State Fair Park, according to their geologic study. So the lake has big swings and naturally flowed out to the West Desert in that period of time. So we're at an extreme. I'm not sure too many man-made actions are going to swing this in a reasonable time frame. You're just not going to do it in the next decade. I don't think you can, unless you're going to shut down growth and agriculture completely. But we do need to conserve, and we need to look at what the options are and plan for all the possible elevations. Thanks for letting me give you all the good news.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate the good news at the end of your presentation. Up until then, I was looking around to see if there was a way I could get onto the roof.
Well, we're just in an unusual situation, so.
Yeah. Thank you. I did a double take on my agenda and realized that I had flown by our 11:15 item, which was public comment. I apologize for that. I'd like to first ask, do we have anyone who would like to make a brief public comment?
Don, I'm sorry to interrupt. Dave has a question maybe before we do the public comment.
Sorry about that, Dave.
Yeah,
I'm looking
Tom.
left, right, and center and not seeing everything.
No worries. Sorry that I'm remote. Tom, really outstanding, sobering report, but I guess we're all just doing what we can. I wanted to circle back just to kind of a comment on all the great studies that are going on. If I have the list correct, we have $5 million to water resources, $10 million to the Bureau of Reclamation Basin Study eventually. Obviously, the tech team and the studies we've funded. One that we didn't cover, maybe Marcelle someday can brief us when it gets up and running, is the $25 million that Senator Romney, I think, is appropriating for saline lakes. So just more of a comment that there's a lot of studies. All we need now is water.
Touche. Joe, go ahead.
Laura, is there any way you could put the map back up? Yeah, the watershed map.
Do my best.
I wanted to bring to the council's attention, I also sit on the water quality board, and a conversation the last meeting several weeks ago was how to define southern Utah relative to a recent piece of legislation that passed where legislature, I think, funded $5 million for reuse and recycling, water reuse and recycling projects in southern Utah. So the question in front of the board was, what's southern Utah? Where to draw that line? And there was some perspective of deploying that funding to sort of rural Utah, and that actually forced that boundary to come up to roughly the southern margin of Utah County, which begins to clip the Great Salt Lake watershed. And I from my thinking, water reuse and recycling projects in the Great Salt Lake watershed, it would be a very different conversation, and a very, you would move forward with that likely differently, being in a terminal basin. So I suggested that maybe perhaps keeping that line, but as it intersects the southern finger of the Great Salt Lake watershed, have the watershed boundary be that boundary. So we don't have GSL watershed area in a water recycling and reuse standpoint without really thinking through that, because it's a much different regime, hydrologic regime. Does So I just wanted to bring that to the council's attention.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that.
A similar issue, Joe. Iron County and Cedar City has reached up into Beaver County to take water down for their needs. So they've obtained water rights in Beaver County, taking them south, and it takes it out of the Great Salt Lake drainage and a common aquifer that goes all the way from Beaver County through Millard, Juab, and Tooele to get to the Great Salt Lake. So that's water they're intending to divert south, I guess, eventually to the Virgin River drainage. So that's another long distance issue.
Thank you, Tom.
Sure. And my intention wasn't to judge the merits of it. I think that's a much different conversation.
That's a project that's moving forward as far as I can tell. It's at a BLM approval stage for the right of ways to put the pipelines in.
Steve?
Steve Erickson, Great Basin Water Network, just to expand a little bit on what Tom just said. Wanted to thank the council and Laura for commenting on the draft environmental impact statement. GBWN and its partners submitted comments of approximately 100 pages of detailed hydrologic and geologic commentary on that project, as well as legal issues. So we're waiting to see what happens with the record of decision, or the final environmental impact statement. Expect it perhaps sometime this year, in the fall, maybe. And we fully expect we'll be in court at some point on this. In the meantime, while we're waiting for the Pine Valley Project EIS to unfold, there has been a water rights application made by some farmer interests, ranching interests in the Escalante Valley. So we're talking Enterprise and Lund, Barrel, that vicinity in western Iron County, 50,000 acre feet of groundwater, which would also be part of that groundwater flow system that pertains to Great Salt Lake. So we'll keep you posted.
Thank you. Okay, now let's, if I might, let's get back to the agenda item for public comment. Are there any individuals who have additional public comments to make? Lynn, who else? Okay, Lynn, fire away.
First of all, I'll say yikes. And then secondly, I've been promising that the video archive of the Great Salt Lake Issues Forum will be posted on our website soon. It's forthcoming, so I'll let everyone know. And you can revisit the program in the event that you missed it, or just as a follow-up for reference information. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Any other comments or issues from council members? Oh, I'm sorry. Come on up.
I just wanted, I don't know if this group is aware, but and as Dave was kind of listing out the funding that is going toward Great Salt Lake right now, the USGS has also allocated $1.25 million this fiscal year to in anticipation of the Saline Lakes legislation funding or being passed at the federal level. So I just wanted folks to be aware that we're working on that now. We're working on developing a work plan. And we've also been funded next fiscal year with an additional 1.25 million, potentially 2.25 million, to just basically prepare for that $25 million passing. So just wanted to make everyone aware of that.
Thank you, Christine. Anyone else? Well, thank you very much for your participation, your comments, all the great work that's going on. I will note again that our next meeting is September 14 at the Antelope Island Visitor Center. If you have any suggestions for topics for that meeting, please let Laura or me know in the near future. And other than that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Unless you just want to stay here for a while.
So moved.
Jeff, motion second. Thank you. And Joe, any debate or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? We're adjourned.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.